Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us at the State of Craft episode 34. Um, Pretty exciting episode today. Quite different from anything we've done before, with a focus on cannabis itself as opposed to the business of cannabis. So yeah, usually, as those of you who are repeat audience members know, we get deep into the world of policy advocacy, and that's kind of more the focus, and just the realities that people are dealing with a lot of the the challenges that producers face in the cannabis industry. And today we've decided to go in a more like science and health direction. Our guest, who I'll introduce in a little bit, blew my mind away at Lyft with some of the tidbits that she had to share with me that I put into practice and was like, what? CBD can be used in that way? What? That like is the opposite of how I've always used CBD.
Mhm.
And yeah, just kind of having that experience and learning about her background and kind of the projects she's undertaken and the amazing work that she's doing. Really, immediately at Lyft, we chatted about potentially having her on the podcast, and she was really into it, and we finally made it happen here. But before I introduce Kayla, just wanted to do the usual intro stuff. We'll talk about the State of Craft and Certicraft first. So, State of Craft, generally a podcast on the state of the legal craft cannabis industry. Today, a podcast on the state of cannabis in our bodies and how our bodies react to cannabis on like a more physical level. Um, the show here is hosted by myself. I'm the CEO of Certicraft, and Certicraft is on a mission to help small to medium cannabis producers transition into and thrive in the regulated market. Medium being up to like maybe like a Tantalus sized company. So, hundreds to 200 employees, kind of on the larger scale of who we'll work with. Most of our customers are smaller, but we make everybody's lives easier. If you are considering making your life easier as a producer, come talk to us. Last but not least, I want to do a land acknowledgement. I live in Nelson, in British Columbia, on the unceded territories um, of the Sinaiaks people, and through intermarriage, the Tanaha people. And here, like in quite a few other places in Canada, is a pretty sad story for the First Peoples here. Um, uh, Basically, to put it succinctly, massacre and genocide. There used to be thousands of Sinaiaks in the area here. Now there are less than 10, and a huge, significant part of that is scalping programs that took place in the 1800s, as well as deliberate destruction of um, uh, resources used for fishing and for different forms of food and shelter. The dams that were built in the Kootenays here in the mid 1900s were also built immediately after the BC government decided to consider the Sinaiaks people extinct, so that they could ignore the legal requirements that they had to actually consult the people. So there's a lot of really fucked up, shady things to allow the colonial settlers in this area to do what they wanted with the community, and it's pretty traumatic. It's pretty fucked up. There's a lot of hurt, a lot of trauma in this area, like in many other areas in Canada, and I think it's just important wherever you are that you take the time to understand what's happened to the first people in your areas. I think this is one of the darker, things that have happened. Usually, it's not like 95% of the population has been killed, but whatever it is that has happened in your area, I encourage you to really dig in and find what the actual history is, if you don't know it already. And then if you do know it, see what steps can be taken on a small scale to try to make a difference and reconnect. One thing that I'm really wanting to do that I haven't yet, I've been pretty overwhelmed with Circuit of Craft, is to connect with the existing Sinaiaks people here and just kind of start having conversations with them and learn what I could do to support them if there's anything that is within my capabilities. But anyway, I don't want this to be a podcast on reconciliation and and genocide. So, what I'll do now. Oh wait, before I introduce Kayla, a few housekeeping things. We have a dedicated chat here. I see there's two chats there, so I guess somebody's using it. Hi, Earl. Hi, Nicole. Thanks for joining. Oh, it's St. Patrick's Day today. I did not know that. I got a little bit of green right there. Look at that. Deliberate. Hashtag green. JK, I did not know it was St. Patrick's Day, but what I did know was that we'd be learning with Kayla today. So I wore my kids' learning shirts.
Oh,
I'm definitely hiding the code a little bit below because it's not about code today. Today it's kids learning generally because we're all kids here. That's right, especially me. I'm a big kid, and I'm excited to be learning. But as I was saying, yeah, we got to chat. Please interact there. We'd love it to have some interactivity. If you have any questions for Kayla throughout this conversation, or for myself, though I don't know why you'd ask me a question today because today is not like a policy oriented thing where I feel like I have an actual significant enough understanding to be helpful in that regard. But if you do have questions, there's a questions tab. Go ask them there and upvote other questions you like. And without any further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce to you Kala Sanmartin. Hi, Kayla.
hi, Sammy.
Thanks for being here today. Really appreciate you.
Yes, happy to be here.
Um, Before we get into it, Kayla, I'd love for you to maybe take a minute or two to introduce yourself and who you are and your relationship in the world of cannabis.
Sounds good. I guess it's like, how many minutes do you have? So
Let's
I'm
give
Kayla.
you let's give you three until
Okay.
10:40 our time, and then we'll get into like the actual discussion. You got 3 minutes to
Okay.
introduce yourself.
Sounds good. At Lyft, I ended up introducing myself as like the farm kid from rural Alberta that was the least likely to use cannabis. And now, after 11 years in my nursing career, I am a full time cannabis nurse, blazing some pretty big trails here in Canada. And I am also a certified holistic nurse coach. So I have a very holistic outlook on my practice. Prior to branching into starting my independent practice, the cannabis nurses, I did about 10 years in the emergency room. And my love for cannabis started when I needed it the most. Cannabis really kind of met me in my darkness, I always say, sort of at my rock bottom. And from there, I held every stigma. Like, I believed the Dare Blair, like all that garbage. And it was by diving into the history of cannabis and the understanding of the endocannabinoid system that I really began to change my perspective and be able to effectively manage my insomnia using cannabis. And I was instantly hooked because it changed my life in so many positive ways that I've been self educating for over 7 years now. And that's led me to where I am now.
Cool. That was less than 3 minutes. Congratulations on keeping it short. I think we clocked in a minute and a half there. Well, thanks so much for being here, Kayla. Yeah, it's exciting to try something different. We've never done like kind of a science and health focused podcast before, but I was telling Kayla before we went on air here, I'm a huge science nerd. I've probably logged, I don't know, close to 1,000, if not more than 1,000 hours on Wikipedia, like going through various science articles, and
Oh, yeah.
that's kind of Wikipedia is such a great time suck for learning about all things science. It does tend to be like cosmology for me, which is the study of the universe as a whole on like its on that time scale of billions and billions of years, but lots of biology and chemistry learnings as well that I like get into and that I find really fascinating. But one thing that I've never actually really read about or even thought about much is the endocannabinoid system. I've thought a little bit about like, oh, isn't that interesting how we have these receptors that can, take on all these different molecules that exist in the cannabinoid family, and what's the likelihood of that, like, you know, evolving in both the cannabis plant and in our mammalian nervous systems. But I've never really given it too much thought beyond that. I think maybe the first time that I started giving it a bit more thought would be like actually just after Lyft. I spent 2 weeks during and after Lyft with my co-founder Nick and his wife Lindsay and their daughter Mabel. Mabel's little baby, and Lindsay was breastfeeding Mabel, and they were telling me about how human breast milk includes a whole bunch of cannabinoids,
Yeah.
and that's a
Yeah.
big part like of, and so just immediately like, what, babies are like getting tons of cannabinoids in their system, like, and the human body produces it. So that was the first time I was really started thinking about it more, like, what is the endocannabinoid system and how did this thing evolve? So maybe like I'll for today, I'm going to be like a total blank slate. I am actually a total blank slate who
Yeah.
knows very little about the endocannabinoid system. And Kayla, I look forward to learning about this wonderful thing through you. And my first question for you is, in like a relatively succinct summary, what
Mhm.
is the endocannabinoid system?
It's a great question. And I'm excited to blow your mind about the endocannabinoid system. You're going to like fall in love so much more with cannabis and this system. So let's try this. Let's see if I can do this in 90 seconds. So the endocannabinoid system is an integral part of the human body. So when you talked about evolution, every mammal, every human, everything except insects has an endocannabinoid system. And in the fetus, at 7 weeks gestation, the endocannabinoid system is beginning to be formed. So it's a very integral part of the human body. And the ultimate goal of the endocannabinoid system is to bring balance or to bring homeostasis to the human body.
Like
It is relative
hormonal balance, or like a different form of balance?
everything,
Everything.
everything. So
pH,
it's
warmth, whatever.
everything. It's involved in every
Wow.
physiological process in the body, and system's even too small of a word for it. It's often referred to as a dome, an endocannabinoid dome. And what it's doing is bringing balance or homeostasis to things like our mood, our appetite, how our body senses pain, how we digest, how we file traumatic memories, how we sleep. And so if you can imagine if all those pieces were into balance, how good we would freaking feel, right? And so we discovered the endocannabinoid system because we discovered THC first. And so they're like, why does this make you high? They wanted to know why it made you high. So they put radioactive material in the THC molecule and then literally watch the human body consume it and literally watch the entire human body light up with receptors for cannabis or for THC specifically. But our bodies don't exist with receptors that don't have something internally that activate them. It's not like our bodies were formed to just consume cannabis. And so that led to the discovery of our body's own made endogenous or internal cannabinoids. And that's what you're talking about in that breast milk. That's anandamide and 2-AG. And so that's stimulating that babe to suckle, to survive, to bring balance into their body. And so anandamide is our bliss molecule. It is named after the Sanskrit word ananda, which means bliss or extreme joy. And anandamide actually massively elevates after exercise, and it's more responsible for that runner's high than endorphins. And then there's this really unique group of conditions under something called clinical endocannabinoid system deficiency theory. I'll just say that once, it's a big word. And there's a group of conditions which are fibromyalgia, PTSD, IBS, and migraines all fall under this in showing that we have significantly reduced levels of anandamide in different parts of the body. These diagnoses all have a lot of similarities. They're diagnosed by exclusion. You don't just get a fibromyalgia diagnosis. You get tested for everything else, and then you get fibro kind of slapped on you as something like, well, we don't know what's wrong with you.
And the only thing
And
left is
so
this.
exactly. And so these individuals are often treated with like multiple pharmaceuticals to manage symptoms. Often that's just layers on top of layers of side effects. And really, they have a very poor quality of life and feel really frustrated and misunderstood in the system. And I
So
definitely,
sorry, quick
yeah,
question for you before you continue with your personal anecdote there.
yeah,
And endamine. So is that like, it's a cannabinoid, I'm assuming? Yes.
yeah. It's our
And
body's made cannabis. It's
and
structurally very similar to THC. So
would
where a
you
natural
find an endamine in any plant-based cannabis, or is it a separate molecule that you wouldn't find in a plant version?
you wouldn't find it in the plant version. But the thing is it's our internally made cannabis. So it's an endogenous cannabinoid. THC and anandamide are structured almost the same. So our phytocannabinoid from the cannabis plant ends up working like a replacement. So it binds in place to where anandamide would bind.
And does it affect us in the same way, or does the structural difference in the molecule cause a somewhat different effect?
Well, it's going to bind a little bit differently. You don't feel euphorically high from anandamide in your body. You can feel that like runner's high, but you wouldn't feel it in the degree of psychoactivity. So when we bring in more of that THC to bind to those cannabinoid receptors in the brain, then we elicit a larger response.
Okay. Sorry, and you were starting to say a personal anecdote about kind of your experience. You were just talking about
Oh,
pharmaceuticals and side effects and layering and
yeah. So like it really changed my perception of those group of illnesses. So like especially fibromyalgia in the emergency room and as a nurse, because we lack this understanding about fibromyalgia, we often give this blanketed thing that it's in their minds. It's they make it up. And I fell to that stigma. And then as I started to learn about the endocannabinoid system, learn that we can be deficient in our internal cannabinoids, and working with fibro patients who finally say things like, I finally just feel right. I feel like myself, is because ultimately what we're doing is we're replacing what's potentially deficient. Whereas those pharmaceuticals, no pharmaceutical can access the endocannabinoid system. So it
Unless I imagine it's like a pharmaceutically produced cannabinoid. If that was the case,
yeah,
could it?
synthetically created
Yeah,
cannabinoid, yes, for sure can access it
but
because they're
that's
just
typically not what a pharmaceutical company is creating.
yeah, exactly. So it's all these other things that we're using to manage these conditions. And without lack of the understanding of the endocannabinoid system, we really fall short for individuals that have these groups of illnesses.
So you mentioned anandamide. You mentioned what was the second cannabinoid that you mentioned that's in breast milk?
Was 2-AG. So those are the two endogenously made cannabinoids that we understand quite a bit about at this time. Guaranteed there's probably more. We're just not there yet in our understanding.
So anandamide is the bliss molecule. What is 2-AG known for?
So it works quite similarly. It just doesn't have a fancy catchphrase like the bliss molecule. I won't even pronounce the whole name. It's so long. I did it for my nursing program, and that's the only time I'm going to do it. Um, 'cause I like laughed at myself after recording the module because I like during it because I was like, that's the last time I'm going to say that molecular structure in its full word.
Yeah.
But 2-AG is interesting. Like we talk a lot about anandamide, but 2-AG is actually the cannabinoid that's most present in our human brains. It's just not as catchy as the bliss molecule.
But it plays a similar function in that it helps us feel more elevated and
Balanced.
balanced.
It's ultimately like it's bringing balance.
So how you've mentioned how the endocannabinoid system, um, its main function is to ensure that we are feeling balanced, and now you're talking about this specific molecule serving a role of helping us be balanced. What does that actually mean? Like how does a cannabinoid molecule in our brain impact balance? What's
Yeah.
that process?
So what's ended up happening, and we have to remember it's receptors throughout the entire human body. It's not just receptors in our brain.
Yeah.
So some of the receptors,
So is the nervous system throughout, or other,
even
or is it outside of the nervous system
bigger,
too?
even think bigger than that, which is really quite interesting about this system because we're very used to like the nervous system, the cardiovascular system, the digestive system. Those make sense to us.
Yeah.
Overlaying all of that is this endocannabinoid system dome. And it's relatively unique in that it works like the body's thermostat. And this endocannabinoid system shows up on demand, which is also really unique. Most of all our neurotransmitters are stored and then released. Whereas this endocannabinoid system, if, say, just for example, like the adrenal glands that pump out our stress hormones, it's on fire, it's too much. And it's so then the endocannabinoid system shows up there as a thermostat. It's like you're running too hot, and it kind of works backwards and is like, okay, whoa, slow your shit. Like stop excreting all these hormones and all these neurotransmitters that are resulting in all this stress. That no, this needs to be balanced.
So
Or
so so let me try to paraphrase what I'm understanding from you, and you tell me
yeah,
if I've got this or not.
yeah,
So we're going through a really stressful situation. Our adrenal glands are pumping out adrenaline, and something in our body, is it the endocannabinoid system itself that is detecting that there's too much of adrenaline in our body? Okay,
yeah.
so our endocannabinoid system detects this somehow. I'm not going to ask about the mechanism by which it detects things, but
We don't have time for
but
that one.
it detects it, and then what it does is it produces 2-AG and anandamide, and that then tells your adrenal glands like, hey, you can like, do our adrenal glands like have the receptors for those cannabinoids like on them so that they can undertake that and like get that
Yeah,
message of chill out?
exactly. And we have endocannabinoid system receptors everywhere in the human body, except one place, which makes actually cannabis really widely safe, is actually in the brainstem. So the back of the brain, we have a brainstem,
Yeah.
and it's very much like a primal part of our brain that controls autonomic breathing and
Is
heart
that
rate.
is that what's known as the lizard brain, or is it below the lizard brain?
Yeah, no, it's along the same concept. And it's like, if you think of like, there's an episode on Friends where Joey's like, Phoebe's all like, oh my God, Joey's been holding his breath for like 2 hours. And then somebody comes and like plugs his nose and he's like, and he gasps for air. That is your brainstem working. It's within the brainstem that opioids bind, causing that overdose death. That's such a huge prevalent problem now. But really interesting, the human body has very little to no receptors for cannabis in that brainstem. That's why in like its 10,000-year history of use, nobody's ever died from an overdose death of cannabis.
Okay. So if it's everywhere else in our body, like, is it like, do we have receptors on like our muscles, on like our bones, on our blood vessels? So it's literally not, it's not limited to a, so how would that work? Would it be like let's say, let's talk about muscle tissue. Like we have like my bicep here is like every cell within the tissue, it just has some receptors there so that they can intake that molecule and affect then the various organelles and tell the whatever the organelle is that produces proteins that, oh, we need to produce something to chill ourselves out because we got this thing here right now.
Yeah. And that's like the basic kind of understanding when we start to look at research for like MS spasticity of muscles. Yep. And like Nicole said,
What was that word? MS spasticity?
Spasticity. So people that have MS disease, like they can't control the spasm. So then they lose control of like
Spasticity, okay.
Spasticity. Yeah. And so it's everywhere. And all it's trying to do is allow our bodies to really self-heal and come into balance. And I think maybe there'd be greater understanding and understanding that like our modern day world is very much good at like dysregulating this endocannabinoid system to kind of put us into these deficient states. And yeah, speaking to Nicole's comment there, the skin has
sorry, before you move forward, I'm just going to read Nicole's comments. Nicole said, the skin has huge receptors too, which is why topicals work so well for people. Just because the recording that goes on YouTube eventually will be just us talking and won't have the...
Yeah, that's what I figured. But yeah, the skin is like our biggest organ in the human body, and it's covered in cannabinoid 1 and cannabinoid 2 receptors. So it can be a really great way to bring cannabinoids into the body and access a lot of them.
So I don't know, it's epidermis is the fancy word for skin, correct?
Yeah.
I was thinking endosperm in my head, but I don't think I think that's like a fetus growth oriented. I don't know what it is actually, but I was thinking endocannabinoid. Is there? But no, it's epi, not endo. Mixing up my fancy science terms here. Cool. Okay, that's pretty fascinating. So, cannabis, one of the things that's like really well known about it is that there's like literally hundreds of different cannabinoids out there. And that's the thing that makes the plant really unique, that it has all these like molecules that interact with our body. So my understanding based off what you're saying is that each and every one of those cannabinoids, be they THC, CBD, CBN, CBG, and all the many cannabinoids that like most of us have no idea what they are, what their names are. So they all interact with those same two receptor types?
Yes and no. So THC for sure will activate like CB1 and CB2 receptors. But within this system, and like say specifically with CBD, how it's actually really working is they actually consider it to be a promiscuous molecule in the human body.
So naughty, CBD.
CBD, she's hitting everybody. Like scientists seriously really struggle to understand CBD because it has such a wide mechanism of action in the human body. So CBD is also able to interact with like serotonin receptors, so our happy hormones in the brain.
Interesting.
It interacts with lots of different receptors that have to do with pain, with inflammation, with mood. And so it's the sum of all of these little activations that CBD does that elicits that response with CBD. And so as scientists trying to study it, it's really hard to start to narrow down its mechanism of action because it's so wide. So we have a long ways in understanding CBD.
So I'm guessing, based off what you're saying, this is a fairly uncommon physical reality or chemical reality, I guess, however you want to label it, for there to be a molecule that interacts with such a wide array of receptors. Is that correct? Or are there other examples outside of cannabinoids that have this kind of behavior, to your knowledge?
Maybe not necessarily to my specific knowledge. There's like terpenes will also like play kind of a role within that. But cannabis, yeah, is incredibly unique in its mechanism of action. And I also like even in my cannabis nursing program, we do talk a little bit about kind of the magic of the cannabis plant because we don't fully understand it scientifically. And part of one of our calls of action to nursing is like kind of be ready to see something we like miracles, which is something we don't really talk about in Western medicine. But there is this plant is amazing. It's been around for such a long time and like that we don't even fully understand it. And what I usually tell people is like, especially with CBD, when you're ingesting CBD and you take it properly and you give it a really good chance to work within the human body, it's sort of like, let's see where your endocannabinoid system shows up for you. Some people will report back to me and they're like, okay, Kayla, this is super weird. I'm like, it's okay. I'm a nurse. We can talk about it. And they're like, I am pooping so much. And you're like, well, that's your endocannabinoid system showing up in your bowels, bringing balance and regulation to the bowel. And it's just like it'll be all these sort of random little things that people will start noticing. And that's that bringing balance even into somebody's appetite where they're like, you know what, I'm not overeating all the time. Okay, interesting. That's your endocannabinoid system showing up for you. And I guess one really important thing to mention as we talk about CBD is its role in the endocannabinoid system isn't just binding to cannabinoid receptors. It actually really doesn't have much affinity for those receptors, but it's doing something different and it's hanging out at the liver level and it's preventing the breakdown of that bliss molecule in our body. So over time, we're elevating our
Anandine specifically, not
anandamide.
THC.
Yep.
Anandamide specifically, not THC.
No, not THC. So anandamide is blocking this receptor or this enzyme that breaks down our bliss molecule. And actually, no, that's I gotta come back to that, Sammy. Now,
Yeah.
my nerd brain is like going all over the place here. So what ends up happening is we boost our natural levels of anandamide, our bliss molecule in our blood. But that's why people often see full effect of CBD at the 8 to 12 week mark. They might take it once or two times. They're like, it didn't help with my arthritic knee pain. It's like, well, you actually have to give it a chance because its mechanism of action is by like slowly accumulating all these effects in the human body. So that's, I think, a really big misunderstanding out there.
So can you explain the relationship between anandamide and our liver? Like I understand, THC liver is kind of a big part of processing it from a non-psychoactive state into a psychoactive state for many people, and that it kind of is an integral part of that experience.
Yeah, with edibles. Yeah.
Yeah, what with anandamide, like the sense I got earlier is that it's produced anywhere in our body as opposed to like a specific location. So is it just like as it gets everything gets filtered through our liver essentially, and therefore anandamide being part of everything is being filtered through, and that's how it ends up there, or is it something different that's going on?
No, that's exactly it. It's just showing up at the liver to be broken down into metabolites so we take some of the metabolites and we'll remake them into anandamide, and then some of them become just discarded. So yeah, that's that liver just being that filter. And when it comes to CBD hanging out, preventing the breakdown, that same enzyme also breaks down lots of our pharmaceutical medications. So then CBD actually, and this is, somebody might talk to their grandparent and be like, you have pain in your knees, go try some CBD. It won't make you high. It's super safe. And they're like, oh, awesome. Let's go try it. But we're actually putting that senior at more risk. If they're taking multiple medications, then we would actually be putting them at risk consuming THC. So CBD has more drug interactions, which can be something that the general public really doesn't know. They're like, well, it's the high that we're scared of, right?
Well, I
But
can tell you, like, I consider myself like more nuanced in my understanding of cannabis than the general public, and I didn't know that. So, and I'm betting that like a good half of the audience, if not the rest of the
yeah.
audience, didn't know that either. I'm curious for the 10 people that are here, if you knew that tidbit about CBD before this moment, could you share in the chat? I'm just curious to see if this is because we're all like experts here in the cannabis industry. So
Yeah.
if none of us knew, then we can assume that nobody knows.
But that's such a cool thing with CBD too, is that interaction at the liver level. Usually we have to take quite large doses to get a drug interaction that could be a negative thing. But that being said, we can use CBD with pharmaceuticals in like a synergistic way. Often in the cannabis industry, what I've sort of noticed is it's like cannabis, or like you use cannabis because you don't use pharmaceuticals. Like there's sort of this like negative nuance to pharmaceuticals. And when I come into this industry, I believe in both. And I believe that there should be a balance of both, that Western medicine is there when we need it. I by no means believe that people should be on medications facing huge side effects. And that's really not positively impacting their quality of life. But I've had a lot of individuals that combine CBD like with opioids, and together they have a synergistic effect. So that individual takes significantly less opioids. They might still take some, but they've reduced their use. So
Cool. I'll just for the video say that nobody has said anything about knowing this before, so I'll take it that the 10 or the, I guess, 8 people other than me and Kayla who are here, who mostly are producers in the cannabis industry, or work heavily in the cannabis industry. None of us knew this either, so so yes, that is a fair assessment that nobody in the general public knows that. Kayla, about CBD, I'm curious. You talked about it being able to bind to the serotonin receptors and to a few different receptor types. You've talked about it being able to inhibit this enzyme in our liver and allow other drugs and molecules, be they produced within our body or coming from an external place, allowing them to have a longer half-life, I'll call it. Is there any other kind of big role that CBD plays in our body on a physical chemical level?
often when I'm talking with individuals about CBD, because we don't have, that big body of knowledge that we can be like, if you have this condition, this is how much you take, and this is what's going to happen. Though I don't necessarily believe that we may never have that. But, anyways, I could talk about that later. But when I talk to individuals about CBD, I talk of it like, because people often think when we're replacing medications or something with cannabis, they'll use the word like medication. I'm like, when we look at CBD, I look at it more as like this super vitamin in the human body. Because yes, it's nourishing our system to try to bring balance into the endocannabinoid system, fighting inflammation, bringing balance to mood, those different kinds of things. But on the other side of things, it's cleaning up precancerous cells in the human body. We have preclinical research. So we're in mice and animals, not in humans. So we're starting to understand the
So it's when
physiology.
it says preclinical, it means there are tests that are happening, just not on a human.
Yes.
So
So we're
clinical means on a human in the world
yeah.
of medicine.
Yes. And
Okay.
so when we're looking at these preclinical studies, we're looking at understanding the mechanism of action that these like what CBD is doing, and that there's this physiologically possible thing that can happen, but we still need to be able to transfer it over into humans. So it's like giving us an idea, but it's not confirmed to happen in humans. That being said, though, we do know that it can start causing apoptosis, or the breakdown of these cancerous cells. And in preclinical mice studies, they did breast cancer and prostate cancers, and they dosed with high dose CBD, only killed the cancer cells and not the normal tissue cells. So it's this like very much fighting inflammation, making it a super vitamin, because a lot of our chronic illnesses and diseases come from inflammation. And then the next is like cleaning up these precancerous cells in the body. And then we talked about you asked about the bones earlier. And so it does, CBD brings balance to the cells in the bones that break down bone mass and then ones that build it. And so it's bringing balance, which shows kind of this novel treatment towards age-related bone loss. And it's just this super vitamin that everybody could benefit from because of the amount of inflammation where it happens in our bodies from our environments, the amount of stress, and we're just ending up nourishing a system without causing psychoactivity.
So I've got a question. I've got 2 competing things in my head. I'll start with there's a joke that came to mind from a word that
Oh,
you said that I just really have to share.
good.
Nothing to do with the endocannabinoid system, but I just have to share it with you. What's the similarity? What is similar between cell division and your sister stepping on your toe?
I don't know what.
Ow, my toe, sis.
I can appreciate a good science joke on a Friday morning.
You said the word apoptosis, and I was like, oh, that joke, mitosis.
I've been saving this one for how long now?
Okay, so then the actual like relevant thing that I have to ask here, you talked at the beginning, or earlier rather, in this conversation about how with CBD, a lot of people don't really like see the effects of it until it's been a few weeks of kind of having the anandamide build up in their liver. One thing I'm curious about is like, because I had to give up THC a long time ago. I used to use cannabis quite a bit when I was younger, and then there was a point in my life where THC started making me really paranoid and anxious, and just not being
Mhm.
helpful for my life.
Yep.
Had to let go of it. But there's one thing that I discovered after moving to Nelson through my friend Shannon Ross here, who's an amazing woman running antidote processing right now. She shared with me uh, what's the word for it again? Suppositories, because she's somebody who has struggled with physical conditions that has needed a significant amount of cannabis to help heal from. But she didn't want to be high all the time and be able to actually do work at a more effective
Yes.
level. And so
Yeah.
she shared that with me, and then I used it and just found it amazing. I was like, oh, I
Mhm.
finally have this like amazing healing plant in my body.
Yes.
I'm able to use it, and I'm not getting high from it.
Yep.
I also learned last summer through a different talk that it affects different bodies are different, and that there are certain bodies who can still have a psychoactive effect using cannabis rectally through a suppository form, which
Mhm.
was news for me. I didn't realize that. But my question is, for somebody like me, where like, if I've had a challenging week and it's Friday and I just want to help my body to kind of bring it back to the endocannabinoid system, get back into balance. Like I'll
Mhm.
I'll take a suppository, I'll go have a bath, I'll like just have a
Mhm.
relaxing evening, and I'll like set intention for the next day or two. I'm just gonna relax, and I'll use cannabis in that form. But it's very sporadic. It's not like I'm using CBD on a regular basis to kind of build up this new state of being. So I'm curious if you can kind of expand on that, on this idea of, on the one hand, there is this long-term benefit of using CBD regularly to kind of bring greater balance to your body. And on the other hand, like from my personal experience, I find it can make a pretty big difference in that kind of shorter form. Curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. And I love that you're talking about suppositories. I love cannabis suppositories. And I joke with a lot of my clients that I work with, it'll only be a nurse that'll tell you to shove cannabis there. But the
I tell people all the time, and I'm not a nurse.
Yes, I'm an advocate out there because you're right. It's a really, really powerful way to consume cannabis. And next to an inhalation method, it becomes much more bioavailable to the body. So when we take an oral cannabis, like say if we're taking CBD on a regular basis, if you're not taking it with food, because it's a fat loving molecule and our bodies are made out of water. So imagine a pot of, you're going to boil pasta and you pour olive oil on the water, it just floats there, right? It doesn't
Yeah.
actually emulsify. So that's cannabis in our human bodies. So when we consume cannabis, making sure that we have like potentially something in our stomachs and a fatty snack, we get better absorption. But we're only absorbing about 20 to 30% of cannabinoids. When we use
And the rest are being broken up by the acids in our stomach.
our stomachs and our liver, and it's not that easily absorbed by the human body. It's a really big molecule. It's fat loving. Our bodies are made out of water. And so and then using the suppository route, we bypass the stomach, we bypass the liver, most of the liver and the bowels. So then we're getting much more absorption. And the thing is where somebody can get high versus why somebody won't get high, it depends on insertion actually. Because if it's inserted just past the sphincter, oh, here we're going so nurse today. So if we're going just past the sphincter within the first inch of the bowel, there should be very good absorption that will just stay within the pelvis and activate those receptors in the pelvis. But if it's inserted further or it's absorbed further up, we have a hepatic vein. So it's a big vein from the liver that's going to pick up cannabinoids and eventually they could potentially reach the brain. So that's why some people might get high. It's totally to do with absorption and
Which
something
is
that's
fair.
actually quite hard to control, right?
And I guess different people physiologically, anatomically, like not everybody's like got the same structure. Like there's differences in the
Totally.
nuances. So if somebody had like a much lower point in that tube, I'll call it that, for lack of a better term. And they only have like 2 centimeters. I don't know if that's realistic, but let's say 2 centimeters where before they hit that vein, then basically every time they use a suppository, it would go past that point.
Totally.
And so they're like, maybe that's the kind of person that is that like a realistic
Oh yeah.
ballpark kind of?
And I think like the biggest thing, like working directly within cannabinoid medicine and this holistic medicine, is that where we're at with cannabis research, and maybe where we'll actually never get to the point where you can say this condition needs this dose. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
But very much it's like about the individual person, like really paying attention to how they respond to your cannabis. And like you identified, you used THC for a long time, and then it became actually something that was negative to you. So that's just like being this personal onus of understanding how our body consumes cannabis and how we might dose from there. So there's a lot of personal education and like nuances that really have to be noted. And I think that's really where we're missing the nurse in this industry, is that educator, to really just help people identify how cannabis works in their body, how they might use it best, so that they leave really independent in their dosing. Cannabis is a way we can reduce some reliance on our Western medicine system. Somebody's helping their chronic pain, managing it at home with their own toolbox as a first line defense, and then we can use Western medicine if we need to. But that's really unique about cannabis. And like you said, why would dosing work sometimes just as an as needed dose, like you said, for an intentional wind down, versus why people might use it on a regular basis? So I think a good example of that would be like pain. So somebody that has like acute pain, a dose of CBD might not really be that efficient. Or somebody that has chronic pain needs that long-term extended release of cannabinoids and nourishment of the endocannabinoid system to manage those side effects and symptoms. Whereas for yourself, if you're just very intentionally like, it's been a crazy week and I need to unwind and relax, that intentional use to like nourish your system, be a tool for your relaxation, that's different than if you suffered with like anxiety all week long and you're like, I need my anxiety to be less. So if you just dose once with it here, it's not going to really long-term help with all the anxiety on the other side. So if that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, no, it totally does.
Mm-hmm.
Totally does. I feel like we could go on for like 3 or 4 hours here. There's so much I want to like talk about on like the chemical, physical, biological level. Like, we've only really talked about anandamide 2-AG. Is that the right term?
Yeah, you got it.
2-AG, THC, and CBD, and like I want to like dive into some of the other cannabinoids and some of the other things, but we're getting close to time here, so I actually want to segue based off what you were saying just a few minutes ago here. You were talking about nursing and how that's like something that's a real lack when it comes to medical patients and helping them figure out what they really need in their body. And so I know there's 2 different projects you've been working on that tie into that. I see there's the cannabis nurses behind you there. So could you
Yeah.
maybe like let's start talking about that. What is the cannabis nurses?
Yeah, so that's my own independent practice. I do lots of various things within the cannabis nurses. But a big thing that I do is like one-on-one consulting with and even though we say like the word like medical cannabis patient, I think it even like really dives even into the rec world more these days, because since the Cannabis Act has been reviewed, or it's in review, from the surveys that we've done, we do know that a lot of individuals that are coming to see their family doctor to ask about cannabis often get the response from their doctor, I don't know enough. Why don't you just go to one of the shops? And so then that becomes like their first point of access. And these people are going into dispensaries, asking these highly medical questions, seeking information and wanting information, and not really.
And not being allowed to like have that information be shared with them by law.
Yeah. So often people just like contact me and be like, hey, I went into the dispensary. I heard about you. Can you help me with this? And then I just become a navigator and be like, hey, did you know we have this free medical cannabis program? Here's how you can access it. Once you access it, if you don't feel like you have gained enough knowledge to feel successful in your cannabis use, then you can come back to me.
And sorry, is this medical cannabis program that you're talking about? This is an educational program that the cannabis nurses created. Is that what you're talking about?
No, just our medical cannabis program of how to get a medical cannabis document in Canada, get it to a licensed producer.
Got it. That program. Okay.
through like a medical cannabis clinic potentially, in hopes that they'll get some education. But ultimately what I'm finding, and that's like as a nurse too in our profession, we need to let people know that there's like the free option out there, especially if you are running like a private independent practice. Some that I work with do have benefit coverage for cannabis and for their nursing services. So that's a little bit of a different thing. But anyways, getting back to the role of the nurse, is that what I found is I work with a lot of people that are on the medical cannabis program, and they're like, I don't understand cannabis. In 10 minutes, I got my medical document, and then they like, here, go shopping. And it's this concept of like, if all of a sudden you got a diabetes diagnosis and you were told you're going to start insulin, you're not just in 10 minutes told, okay, you can take up to like this many units of insulin per day. See you later. And you're sort of out to this site, go shopping for insulin, right? And you're just
Yeah.
like, what does this all mean? It's a complex little toolbox, and to really get to the full potential of cannabis and really use it as best as possible, people need guidance, they need education, and they need support. And I sort of alluded to earlier, when I came to cannabis was in like a very vulnerable state. I hadn't slept in weeks and I'd lost my first pregnancy. And so that's when I came to cannabis, and I thought, we need nurses here to hold space for these individuals, because the current state where stigma is still very much prevalent, it's not very much accepted into Western medicine. People are coming to cannabis as a last resort, not as their first resort where, oh, I'm starting to feel anxiety or I'm starting to feel pain. It's these individuals that like narcotics are no longer working for, or maybe they've been abusing narcotics or sleeping pills, or, you know, they're just in this state of just feeling really quite broken. And how do you all of a sudden head in and learn this brand new modality? How do you don't know about the endocannabinoid system? You may not know how THC works in your body. How do you choose quality products on the market? There's so many products out there on both platforms, rec and medical, but not all CBDs are made equal. Do you know the difference between full spectrum? And this will maybe kind of tie into your podcast more, but a huge piece of education that I do as well is like knowing that this is medicine that you're putting in your body. Where do we find quality medicine that is actually like made to be consumed by the human body? And that's usually those smaller producers. So I'll get to sort of know my smaller producers, find out their whys behind why they're in the industry, and like share that with individuals. And if we have to pay for our medicine, let's maybe put our medicine where like our money where it counts, right?
Yeah.
And support these people that are making, that they know the power of the cannabis plant, they know that they're making medicine. And so how do people really feel educated and empowered in their cannabis use? And that's through nursing education.
Yeah. No, I see. We've got lots of like ideas bouncing around in my head. Like one thing we've been thinking a lot about doing at Certicraft is to develop our own medical cannabis network, largely because of the failures of the distribution channels that exist today. Like our mission as a company, when I talked about at the beginning, is to help small to medium scale companies transition into and thrive in this industry. And the thriving part is really hard today. And one of the biggest barriers around that is the distribution channels that exist. So we know we can create kick-ass user experiences. We know that we can create things that make a huge difference in just the ease of use of people. And we focused on the producers so far, and one thing we've really been thinking a lot about is doing the same thing that we've done for producers for medical patients, creating a kick-ass system that educates them and helps them find exactly what they need, and at the same time produce a much more lucrative distribution channel for producers. Because with us, it's not going to be about Certicraft becoming rich, it's going to be about our producers being able to straight up double their revenue. And that's a big part of something we're thinking about doing. And we haven't decided whether or not to do it or not. If we do, it would probably be in 2024 would be when we'd start that. But if we do it, I want to talk to you and collaborate on like having the educational part in place, because I feel like that would be a real win-win for both of our visions.
Oh, absolutely. And it's just like, that's what people want is education, and they can't get it anywhere, or they can't find credible information where it's not necessarily, or if it's like backed by a brand or whatever it might be. But we need to like connect these people that are like, that cannabis is changing their quality of life, and be able to connect them with people that are making medicine and understand that they're nourishing this master regulator of the human body, and what they're doing really matters. And those are the people that really deserve to be rewarded in this industry. And it breaks my heart every time I hear another product's not available anymore because somebody's gone under, who are making like a suppository that was, they knew that it had to be absorbable in the water side of things and in the fat soluble side of things. Therefore, you have a better product. Like,
Yeah.
I want to see that quality in people's medicine.
Yeah. No, 100%. And yeah, there's a long way to go, and but it's so hard when there's so much stigma coming from the government. I mean, that's kind of
Yep.
the biggest barrier, that the public and the government, there's so much stigma involved. So yeah, that's just a barrier that presents itself time and time and time and time again. And everybody on
Yep.
this call knows that and lives that and experiences that. Um,
Mhm.
but it is changing too. Like, I've been talking to the BC government a lot over the past 6 months. Like, just
Yeah.
developed more and more relationships with a lot of people there, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of people who are like leading entire ministries who are on our side and fighting for us. It's just they're
Mhm.
dealing with their own stigma from other government ministries, and
Totally.
so
I
it's
have this like big desire to work with one of those bigger leaders and be like, let me show you what cannabis nursing is and what cannabis could do to help you. Like, let me defy all your stigmas.
yeah,
Because with every person that I interact with, I always talk about the history of cannabis first, so that people really start to understand where the stigma comes from in and around cannabis. And it gives them freedom to actually like feel unapologetic in their use, feel really educated in their use. And that's like why I have like a free kind of Queens Club every month for women to land in, learn about the endocannabinoid system, learn about cannabis, ask their questions, and be in a safe community. Because you're right, there's so much stigma around still, and it's frustrating. But I think what's really going to change is that people are wanting it. They're asking their doctors. I encourage all my clients to call into their insurance companies and ask about it. Like, people need to speak about it. So just encouraging them to speak about it in a really educated and informed way, so that they don't feel nervous sitting down with their doctor talking about their cannabis use.
yeah,
They feel relatively empowered by it. So
yeah. Awesome, Kayla. Yeah, so much to think about. I'm stoked that you're doing the work that you're doing. I know in your bio that you shared with us that we had in our event description, you also talked about this holistic cannabis nursing program that you've been developing. Can
oh
you
yeah.
tell us about that?
Yeah, all my books are sitting around me for it right now. But yeah, it would have been about a year and a half ago that I got in connection with an institute called the KIND. So it's the Canadian Institute of Integrative Nursing Development and Education. So it's a accredited continuing education for nurses within the holistic space.
So, as in, once a nurse is a nurse and
Yeah.
accredited by whatever nursing
Mm-hmm.
college or body exists, I don't know what the right term would be here.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
um, then they could take this course if they wanted to become a holistic cannabis nurse.
Yeah, exactly. And they had started a year and a half ago. I took their independent practice program just to know how I could like write or like how I could do this. And then they're like, I was chatting with them. And they're like, we need to talk to you more. And I told them what I was planning on structuring in my mind. And they said, we need to put you through our holistic nurse coach program so that you can write us a cannabis program. And I'm like, what? Thinking like major imposter syndrome, right? And yeah, so now coming out in April 20th, 420, big miss on that one.
I always love it when like bigger institutions are down with like just being silly and funny, and these are the
And it
kind of
was
ways.
their idea, which I
Yeah.
love.
Yeah.
So this holistic cannabis nurse program will launch, and yeah, it's accredited. So you get education credit hours for the program, and you'll end up with a certificate in the end. It's a 16 module program over 6 months that, yeah, I've been working on for over a year and a half now. And so it's just trying to bring in the nursing lens with cannabis and pulling it all together. So we have, oh, look at Nicholas put it up in the thing for the KIND there, the link to it, which is awesome.
Oh, but
Um,
the automatic URL says holistic nurse Reiki practitioner program, so you got to talk to them about making sure
oh yes, I
that.
will notify them for sure. Yeah, so this program launches, and it's in hopes of just bringing in more powerful educators into this industry, and advocates as well, and like advocates that can advocate for these individuals that are consuming cannabis, and be advocates within Western medicine, have those conversations with doctors and all those different things, supporting our patients that are using cannabis and helping to advance research as well.
Cool. Well, I'm excited for this. I'm excited that there's an actual opportunity for more nurses to become more informed on this. And it sounds like
Yeah.
you already have people who are signed up according to the
You know
the,
what?
the chat here.
Yeah, it's like blew my mind. Yeah, I remember meeting Chelsea from Dabble, the owner's sister, yeah, who's already signed up for the program. Amazing. I remember when they were asking me, they said, okay, when we run the first beta run of the program, how many students is your goal to have in it? I was like, yeah, 10 would be great. And they laughed and they go, well, we have 33 on the wait list. So I think we'll go with 25, Kayla. And I was like, what? I'm so excited just to have like more nurses alongside me. I've been asked to speak at like the American Cannabis Nursing Association's annual conference, so that maybe we can start to create our own like nursing association here in Canada for cannabis nurses, and just bring this validity piece into here, where we can advocate on so many different levels. And ultimately, there was studies that went out or surveys that went out around legalization, like to the public. If you had questions about cannabis, who would you ask? 8 out of 10 came back saying a nurse. But we have no formal nursing education in Canada. And so I guess it's just an attempt to meet a need. And it's very much a grassroots effort, because nursing schools and universities don't want to talk about the endocannabinoid system or cannabis at this time.
Which
So
is so bizarre if it's like as integral as what we're talking. If literally
yes,
every baby ever for the entire duration of their breastfeeding, they are
yeah,
receiving doses of cannabinoids, like wouldn't
yeah.
that be something you want to teach in a
Or
nursing
like
program?
when we went in and discovered like why THC made you high, which was in like the late 80s, early 90s. It's just how we're studying cannabis. It's so stigmatized. At that time, the AIDS epidemic was happening. We had so much advocacy work within that population about THC helping them and wanting legal access. You think we'd start to study why THC was helping them, but no, we're just, why does it make you high?
Yeah.
It's so frustrating. But hopefully with more nurses in this space and providing this guidance for individuals. And honestly, like every day I'm so filled with joy. I love my job because I'm watching people like regain this quality of life, and there's nothing more rewarding. It's less rewarding to like stabilize somebody that's having a heart attack or is dying and emerge. It's way more exciting to see people have quality of life. And that's something that very much Western medicine is missing. We're very symptom management. You don't sleep, okay, here's a sleeping pill, see you later. But with this nursing program and the holistic approach to caring for individuals, it's it's totally different, because we're caring about the endocannabinoid system. And I'd love to throw this in, so maybe I'll kind of end with this. But this system, yes, it's nourished by cannabis, but it's nourished outside of cannabis. So when you said that you want to relax, you take some time to, set intentions for the next day, you enter into that relaxation mode, you're boosting anandamide already through breath work, through meditation, through eating whole foods, nourishing your gut health, singing, which you do. And I know that. Tell me this, Sammy. How good do you feel after you have a show?
I won't. Well, after shows, I feel pretty good if the show went well. I'll speak to, because I jam every night at home. Every single day I make
Yes.
music,
Yeah.
and I'm so happy that like I discipline myself to doing this, because more often than not, I just don't have. I mean, I'm running a business here. Like, I'm the CEO of Certicraft. It's a lot of fucking work, and it's been a lot of work, especially in the
Yes.
earlier days.
Yes.
And so there's many nights where I get home, like I get home from work at like 8, 9 p.m. I've been working since 9 in the morning, and I'm just
Yep.
like, I don't want to do this right now. But I force myself to do it. And every single time, without fail, I feel so much better after even like a half-hour little jam of just singing in my little studio.
And
And
that's like, it gives me goosebumps, because that's you boosting your bliss molecule in your body. And that's like a similar action that cannabis is doing when we kind of feel that joy. And so by through nursing, what we're doing is we're acknowledging this endocannabinoid system, and then we also acknowledge what dysregulates it. So very much our modern day world, which guaranteed both of us experience this running our own businesses and writing a nursing program. I'm like, I'm not your poster child right now. My endocannabinoid system is more dysregulated than it's ever been. So I have changes in my mood, in my sleep, how I'm digesting food, all of those kind of things. My body's in more pain. But what happens in this modern day world is that chronic levels of stress dysregulate the endocannabinoid system. So when we're, fighting so hard against stigma and policy, and I think of all these producers that are fighting so hard to stay alive and making these beautiful products that need to be part of this market. But they're experiencing such high level of stress because of all these rules and regulations. Or say in motherhood, everybody's racing and running around, they got to work full time. Their kids are in 8,000 activities. Thank God my son loves music and is introverted. Guitar for Christmas. Absolutely. Soccer ball. Yeah. Anyways, but we're racing and we're running. And because we're racing and running so much, we tend to neglect our diets and eat processed foods, which dysregulate the system. We consume high amounts of caffeine to survive the chaos, which in high doses dysregulates the system. We're so exhausted and dysregulated by the end of the day that often people either turn to alcohol or multiple prescription drugs to be able to relax and get into a sleep state. And then we wake up and we do it all over again and we still feel like shit. And ultimately, when we sort of reflect back on having this pandemic over this extended period of time, and as a society having a massive general level of chronic stress that was layered onto the stress that was already existing, it's no doubt that when we look at statistics for mental health pre-COVID and post-COVID, that our mental health rates are significantly higher. More people are suffering from things like depression, anxiety, PTSD, those kinds of things. And ultimately, cannabis can be a tool to help us start to engage in more of these healthy endocannabinoid system behaviors and let other behaviors start to fall away. And so when I'm talking with my clients, we talk about the endocannabinoid system and we talk about cannabis. But the way we talk about cannabis is not a cure-all. It's a very amazing because it can access the endocannabinoid system. Therefore, it can work for a lot of different things. But ultimately, cannabis is a tool. Yeah. And it brings us that baseline level of health. It can help with our sleep, help manage our pain, and help regulate mood at a baseline level. Because if somebody sits down at their doctor's and is the doctor looks at them your BMI is high, you need to lose weight. Okay, how do we get to weight loss? Where they assess that they're able to sleep, where they assess their anxiety levels or depression motivation levels, where they assess for their chronic pain levels. And often they're not. So what I come in and do is I help people get their baseline, and we set goals in and around the endocannabinoid system, but just intentions, not even goals. And what ends up happening is when we get this baseline, those healthy living behaviors tend to click into place really quite easily without effort, and they're sustainable. Mm-hmm. And so that's really, I'm hoping to really pull through this nursing program is a really beautiful way of providing health promotion, but giving a tool for people to actually get to health promotion.
That's amazing, Kayla. I'm glad we've gotten to know you and that you are here today. I've got one question for you that's just coming from because I shared this I shared this event in a Facebook micro cultivators group that I'm part of, and I in there part of my write up I had said did you know one thing that I just learned through Kayla's website is that the endocannabinoid system is the largest neurotransmitter in our bodies. I had no idea. Not neurotransmitter system in our body, rather. And then somebody responded saying, I don't know if that's technically true, but I don't know what they mean by largest. So I'm just curious if you can speak to that so that I can go back and explain more and be watch the thing. Here's what Kayla had to say to that comment.
That's speaking towards that endocannabinoid system dome, that it's involved in every physiological process in the body, coming back to balance. So it does make it the largest transmitting system in the body. And actually an amazing resource is a talk by Dr. Rachel Knox. She does a TED Talk.
Write this down right now.
Yeah, Rachel Knox does this amazing about quite maybe about 15-minute sort of summary of the endocannabinoid system that's just delivered in the most beautiful way to increase our understanding about the system. And we're just so lucky to have this plant available to us, even though, there's a lot of hard ways to get to the plant. Oh yeah, there we go. Nicholas put it up in the chat for us.
He's pretty good about finding links that are relevant and putting them in there.
Love it. Yeah, ultimately we have this amazing plant to bring nourishment to this master regulator of the human body, but we still have so much stigma, like you said, in the way. We have so much rules, we have so much regulations, we have so much misunderstanding amongst Western medicine and within the individuals even consuming cannabis, that for this to become more of that ancient medicine that nobody thought twice about having around. I think we still have a really long ways to go. And I'm hoping with having nurses in that place, a trusted healing professional in that place to help people navigate that, we'll see some really good outcomes. Well, I see good outcomes all the time. I cry tears of joy now in my profession because I'm like, get a text that somebody's knees don't hurt for the first time in 20 years, or they slept without a nightmare for the first time in 20 years. Like, that's profound stuff to make people's quality of life better. And I love that we're focusing on quality of life. We're not here to solve everything. Truly miracles. It looks like miracles. It is miracles. This plant is magical.
Yeah.
And she deserves to have education about her, not just to be like stifled, right?
Yeah.
We need to have that education out in this world.
Well, amazing, Kayla. Glad you're making that education happen. Before we wrap up here, I just want to see if there's any other projects, any other things you got going on in your life that you want to share here. Oh, the eyebrows went up. I assume that's oh yes, there is something I want to talk about.
People are like, "What are you up to now, Kayla?" I'm like, "Well, always like way too much," but it's just the passion of the plant leads me places. A really exciting project that we have launching on March 31st, actually. So coming up really quickly here is I've had this little seed in my brain about like, how do we really start to destigmatize cannabis? Like, what would have a great impact? And then I realized as I was journeying alongside people that were using cannabis and coming from really dark places and moving into like light and moving into like onto their healing path and all that kind of stuff, I was like, we need to share these stories. I know that they're not scientific evidence or anecdotal information, but these stories are profound. And so I brought it to this amazing team of women at the beginning of January here. And I said, hey, I want to share the stories of women that are using cannabis as a powerful tool for change in their life. And so that's when the catalyst was created. And so through divine nature and just kind of jumping in on this journey, I have Nora from Bud and Bloom as our creative director. I have Deanna from Moss and Moon, who's our amazing photographer, and Heather, who's my partner in the Cannabis Nurses. Through all of this chaos, and the universe is like, yep, we're aligning with you. A couple weekends ago, we photographed 33 women and we collected their stories. And March 31st, we released the exhibit to the public. And we have an art exhibit with this. So it'll have their beautiful, like, these are cannabis photos and female like photos that you've never seen before. They're pure art. And it's reflective of their story. And then we're sharing who they are, how they define themselves like within their roles. And then in a succinct way, we're sharing their story. And that'll all be up in Kingsway Mall till the end of May. And we'll be releasing it online as well.
In Vancouver, Kingsway Mall, or a different Kingsway Mall?
No, in Edmonton area.
Okay.
So,
multiple Kingsway Malls. Okay.
Yes.
I assumed it was in Alberta, but then Kingsway Mall was in Vancouver. Okay.
Yeah. No, in the Edmonton area. So we have this like really beautiful gallery coming out, women that were really vulnerable in sharing these stories. And we realized that we're defying stigma in so many different areas than just in cannabis. We're talking about drug addiction, mental health, domestic violence, all of these things that the cannabis plant helped people regain their quality of life with. And these stories are absolutely profound. And all we're trying to do is hold them up in truth and light and try to reach the public to say, come look at these 33 unique people that use cannabis. They don't fit your stoner stigma. And just really start to destigmatize cannabis through sharing stories. And we want to move forward with this project. There's been a lot of interest to like bring it to Vancouver, bring it to Ontario, have it at these conferences and stuff. And we're hoping to get some sponsorship down the line so that we can actually like move this gallery. We have a timeline. We can move it around Alberta and to other provinces like till like the fall. So, and ultimately also what an envisioning of this was, because we photographed women that are in the cannabis industry as well in lots of different areas, was just to bring a collective reminder of why we're in this really hard industry, why sometimes it feels really awful. But we just wanted to remind and re-inspire that we're doing this because we know the power of this plant. We know that this plant has an ability to help our society, help heal big parts of our society. I truly believe the cannabis plant could heal the nursing profession from the COVID pandemic. But we don't get there until society starts to realize that and recognize that. So we're just hoping that this momentum, because these women would share their stories or their cannabis use, then all of a sudden 5 other women would be coming to me for advice. So they're defying stigma. And we just wanted to celebrate them for that.
Well, that's an
Mhm.
amazing, beautiful thing, and I can tell you that
Actually,
immediately as you were sharing that, my first thought was like, "Oh, we're curating a space at the BC Cannabis Summit in the end of April. We'd love to have this gallery there." I don't know if that's even realistic
right?
or not, but
It could be if we are able, because this is literally a passion project that four of us have thrown
yeah.
our hearts and souls into.
No, we would sponsor. I mean, we're sponsoring that space, so we would help you get out there. What's the timeline of the gallery in that's
It's
happening in Edmonton?
so the physical gallery will be in Kingsway Mall till the 15th of May. But the physical gallery, it's big. Somehow we ended up with 33 women. I don't know why we couldn't count, but it was just like this calling. Like we had to photograph all these women, and at the end we're like, oh fuck, that's a lot of wall space. Like,
Yeah,
but anyways, it's happening. But we do have goals to make an audiovisual version of it. And yeah, really kind of want to just bring in a piece that provides some thought provoking instead of, because when you come to these conferences like Lift and stuff like that, you leave with more bad stories than you do good stories. Like
yeah,
there's this collective like burnout amongst this industry. And so I was like, I want to share from my perspective what I see that gets me so fired up every day. I want to share these stories with the world. And these women are excited to have a platform to share their stories too. And if we continue forward, we want to focus on a different population every year. One
yeah,
year, I'd love to photograph a group of seniors, tell their stories about what cannabis did for them.
yeah.
You know, I have somebody in their 90s that's finally sleeping like from and not having nightmares since like the 60s. Like that
Wow,
person's story deserves to be told. And all these stories are
wow.
going to go to like our political leaders because right in Edmonton, we're like going to be like really close to an election at that time. So we'll be sending them into MLAs and just be like, hey, like this is what we're talking about. We're not just talking about stoner culture, right?
Yeah. Amazing, Kayla. Well, thank you so much for your time here.
Mhm.
Really loved having you here. Any final thoughts you want to share before we wrap things up?
Oh man, I have so many thoughts. Like I said, I have 16 modules worth of
Yeah,
information I could share, but I think it's really powerful for us to acknowledge our endocannabinoid systems and learn about it because the more that we nourish our endocannabinoid systems, the the better your cannabis is going to work for you because you have that knowledge behind how to use it. And ultimately, by knowing how to use it, we're respecting the plant.
yeah,
And the more we respect this plant and the more that we use it in its really powerful way, that we will change stigma.
yeah,
And so I think it's definitely worth something looking into. And it can be a huge piece in understanding our own health and how we can nourish our bodies. It's much more motivating to know you're balancing your endocannabinoid system when you're doing meditation to get
yeah,
somebody to buy into it versus, okay, let's just breathe for a bit. Like,
yeah. Cool, Kayla. Well, I definitely want to have you back again. I feel like we should have like a series of 8 sessions with Kayla to learn more and more about the endocannabinoid system every like once a quarter. Kayla
yeah, I'm here for
time.
that.
um, but yeah, thank you so much for being here. If you're watching this on YouTube, we'd really appreciate it if you liked this video, shared it if you liked it. And no, that is not the label we're gonna use, Nick. That is
I like the effort.
and I'm not and
It's all good.
didn't think that through.
Admitted not being able to count on this episode. So it's all good.
um, we really appreciate if you subscribe to the channel as well. For all of you here in the audience today, thank you for being here. Next time in 2 weeks, I don't know what day that is, April something, end of March, somewhere there.
Yeah.
We have Nathan, I forget his last name. I believe he's the founder of the Cannabis Diplomats. And I think, is that their name? Or no, Diplomats International. I think that's their name. They do a lot of policy advocacy work in the cannabis sector, and their biggest focus is on cannatourism. So we got a lot of insight into cannatourism from somebody who has been there, done that with policy advocacy. And Nick just posted a link there if you want to register for that. And yeah, excited to have you all. Thanks again, Kayla. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And till next time.